Great.
So, we actually did a pollinator study on our road systems back in 2021 and through 2022. And then we had our report finalized in 2023. So I'm going to go ahead and share a little bit about that research study that we did, and then how we used the information and data collected to work through the Monarch CCAA and what we're doing to implement from from the data. So next slide. So this is the final report. It was published in July 2023. Um, basically, coming in new to hearing about the Monarch CCAA, this came about because ITD was thinking about enrolling into the Monarch CCAA, and we wanted to really know what and if our roadsides had pollinator activity in it. We wanted to know if there was pollinator habitat available and is it suitable. So some of the questions we asked were, are roadsides used by pollinators, and if so, what kind of pollinators? Are our roadsides compatible with pollinators? And do we have the milkweed plants, the host plant for the monarchs, and what locations? And then how can we manage our road systems for pollinators? So that's the basis of the study. And next slide. I'm going to share with you some of the results that came about from that study. So, in looking at and evaluating the road systems, we focused on the southern Idaho area because the Snake River Basin is the main migration route for the monarch butterfly coming into Idaho and leaving Idaho. So, with that, we focused on several different road systems from interstates to state highways, U.S. highways, and then a couple local roads. With all of that data, the results of the flowering species, probably some of you aren't too surprised, but we documented 87 flowering species, and about half of that were native, the other half not so native or non-native, including some noxious weeds and some other weedy species. So, kind of the most abundant, widespread non-native plants included the tall tumble mustard, fixweed, western stickweed, and alfalfa. Alfalfa is one of those interesting ones because it is a nitrogen fixer. It's one that we tend to include in some of our seeding mixes to get some of that nitrogen back into the soils. We have focused over the years more looking at lupins and some of those native ones for that. Next slide. So this is a map of the area that we surveyed for milkweed. So we covered several thousands of miles, so over 900 miles of road systems in the southern Idaho area. With that, we counted, our research team counted milkweed stems, and the stems varied, and the patches varied anywhere from 3 stems up to over 7,000 stems in a patch. The larger milkweed patches that had 50 stems or more, we collected more specific information on that, such as the stem number, the size, the density of patch size, the adjacent land use, floral resources, and dominant species. The rapid assessment of the monarch butterflies when it started in 2021 included inspecting hundreds of milkweed patches for monarch eggs and larvae as well. We found that the species to be very rare within our Idaho road systems in 2021, but in 2022, it was almost a hundredfold increase. So in 2022, we observed more monarchs in the road systems within our right-of-ways, which included 3 adults, 3 caterpillars, and which compared to 0 in 2021. So that was very interesting. The difference being in 2022, we had a lot more moisture for a little longer period of time. So our moisture came in April and extended into June. So the more moisture we had, the more plants we had, the more abundant species of pollinators we had. So the map actually just shows a little bit more about, kind of the range of size, density. So the darker the density, the more plants, and that's kind of where the different shading colors in it were. So next slide. And this is just showing our patches, or excuse me, our milkweed collection over the road system in the light teal or turquoisey colors, compared to the Monarch data that was collected over the past 10 years. So those dark blue teardrop looking points are where monarchs have been sighted over the past 10 years. So you can see that we actually surveyed our road systems where monarchs had been sighted. Next slide. So with our monarch, or excuse me, with our milkweed evaluation and documentation, we had actually kind of pulled out or teased out some of our tier one, tier two hot spots for milkweed, and those are in the circles. So the darker circles are the higher density, larger milkweed patch sizes, and the tier two or the lighter orange are also milkweed sightings or milkweed patches, but a little bit less density. So we kind of broke it down into tier one and tier two milkweed sites. Next slide. Another part of the research covered, bee species and richness as well. So we looked at pollinators themselves that were inhabited in our road systems, and there were over 70 bee species identified within our monitoring plot location. So we had like 60 monitoring plots within the southern Idaho areas, and over 70 bee species were identified. The bee species richness and diversity increased as roadside and traffic levels decreased. So in our less trafficked areas, we had a lot more bees, which was interesting to me because I was like, usually our less trafficked road systems were narrower right-of-ways as well. So the larger, more larger, more intense managed right-of-ways, such as our interstates, they had significantly fewer bee numbers and fewer bee species overall. The bee species richness and diversity increased as our NDVI, which is one of the things that we ranked, which is the greenness of a road system that you can gather from using LiDAR and photo imagery. So bee richness and diversity increased as these road system NDVIs were decreased or browner. So the less green road systems, looking at imagery, produce more bee species. So like those typically would be drier, less lush areas, less green plants growing. And in summertime, everything turns brown anyway. But it means that it's the drier sites and the less green, plants that were there. And then we also identified bee hotspots and two different highway systems. So I'm not sure, I might have that a little bit later in the slide. So next slide. So for butterflies, we covered a 100-meter transects. We collected butterfly species identification. So we had 38 butterfly species representing 5 butterfly families that were documented and surveyed in our monitoring plots. Most butterflies are more wide-ranging and not centrally placed foragers, so they can cover a lot more area, not just in our right-of-ways, but they kind of forage around into the adjacent lands and that. And the floral abundance and species of host plants were best predicting butterfly richness and abundance. So Butterflies seem to be attracted to more floral resources, so more things that were flowering, and the more diverse things flowering attracted more of the butterflies than the bees. I don't know if that makes sense, but so the more flowers that were flowering and the more diverse flowering plants that were flowering, that's where more butterflies happen to be. So, which is another interesting fact between the differences between butterflies and bees. Next slide. So this slide is just showing the butterfly and bee hotspot zones, and we circled those hotspot zones for the butterflies as well as the bees. Again, we documented and surveyed 70 different bee species, 38 different butterfly species. Butterflies are non-specific or non-site specific. The bee richness and distinctly was distinctly higher along state highways or lower, less trafficked areas. And just again, most of the butterflies just had a wider range of area that they covered. So next slide. So this is just one of the things we happen to find. It was interesting because this particular area, which was on one of our U.S. highways, which from the look of it, when you're just driving by or walking around, it had a lot of grass species. And at the time we were collecting surveys, not a lot. I mean, there were flowering species as well, but predominantly looking grass species. And it butts up against certain areas of agriculture. This was the one spot out of all of our transects and out of all of our surveyed areas that produced the most bees. We had 191 bees in this one spot, which you know and 21 different species in this one spot, which is totally blew me away. It's like, why here? I don't understand it, but why here? It was just amazing to see that many species and that many bees in one location. And again, it's typical of our normal road systems. It wasn't anything that was outstanding with a lot of floral resources out there, but the bees just loved it here. Next slide. So some of the objectives for our research also included management strategies and some of the things that we should be focusing on or thinking about as we look at roadsides and pollinators. And that was came about was prioritizing smaller roadsides with narrower right-of-ways as well as lower NDVIs for pollinator friendly plantings. Maximizing higher NDVIs can be a tool to identify noxious weed patches. So our higher NDVI sites, those sites that would be greener and a lot more from the photo imagery and that sort of thing, typically had more weedy species in it. And then even degraded roadsides host a variety of bee and butterfly species, like in the last slide. It was like, stuff that I didn't really realize or see as anything different. Even those degraded roadsides can host a variety of bee and butterfly species and can be managed to benefit pollinators. Next slide. So, some of the best management practices that came out from the study included mowing only clear zones or those safety zone areas within the road system and not mowing the whole entire fence line to fence line. This provides pollinator habitat and resources in the right-of-way areas farthest from the trafficked, road system, and it keeps pollinators away from the more hazardous areas adjacent to the road system. And then retaining mower clear zones for smaller, less trafficked roads. Mower width should be adjusted to a smaller width for narrower right-of-ways or narrower road systems. And then outside or beyond those clear zones, we can we can like limit our mowing to maybe target mowing or spot mowing treatments instead of just mowing the whole area. So mowing activities should be completed, before May 15th in the southern Idaho area, before the monarchs migration. That was another thing that came out. And then where possible, we should leave shrubs and standing woody stems for nesting bees. Next slide. So some of our best management practices for spraying from this research came in with spot treating weeds instead of blanket spraying or just your broadcast spraying the whole right-of-way system. Avoid spraying while weeds or adjacent plants are in bloom. Spraying early in the season before flowering or later in the season after flowering. Limiting our broad spectrum herbicides to target only, those using specific herbicides to treat the specific noxious weeds. And again, avoid spraying insecticides and never spraying the milkweeds. So leaving milkweed patches alone, not spraying, is another practice that came out. Next slide. So some of the things about plantings to consider. So prioritizing restoration and planting pollinator plants farthest from the road. In wider right-of-ways, we can look at planting them closer from, like, say, the ditch line out towards the fence line instead of right up against the road. And then prioritizing native plants at the periphery of intact native communities. So that's another thing that came out from the study, is that where we had adjacent land and native habitat within the right of way or adjacent land, we want to retain that. We want to try to build up on that instead of planting in places where we have a lot of invasive species competition. And then protecting and enhancing native sagebrush steppe in habitats in our right-of-way system. So sagebrush appears to be an important factor associated with higher roadside bee and butterfly diversity. So where those native sagebrush, rabbitbrush, steppe habitats occur, those are areas where we had higher bee and butterfly diversity. And even degraded roadsides can host a wide range of bee and butterfly species, even if we don't see them. Next slide. And that just is reiterating the importance of sagebrush steppe and pollinator habitat. Next slide. So some of the key takeaways from the study included, milkweed plants themselves really were more documented and located in close to proximity to water or irrigated agriculture. So it didn't have much to do with elevation, climate, other factors. Milkweed within our road systems were pretty much came about or were located in and around where water was, whether it was irrigated agriculture, whether it was a ditch, whether it was a canal or a creek. I mean, anything where there was water coming in, seepages, that's where we saw most of our milkweed. It had nothing to do with other factors within that. Bees were located and in more abundant in lower NDVI sites, smaller highways, higher floral diversity, butterflies. The more flowers, the more diversity of flowers they were. We found more butterflies. Non-native plants were more invasive plants were found highly in higher in the NDVI site. So higher the NDVI, more abundant noxious weeds, invasives that were. And management. So our management strategies can help tip the scales to benefit pollinators. So next slide. So this is I'm going to go ahead and let's go ahead and talk about this site. So we used the recommended management timing for monarchs that the Xerces Society had put out, looking at where Idaho is. And their map shows that there's 3 different management timings. In the southern, if we just look at southern Idaho, this area was let's see, the timing for that was like in the least likely to have an effect would be anywhere from the end of September up into May time frame, basically, end of September to May 15th. So looking at southern Idaho, which we focused on, we wanted to include these management timings. And with that, we'll go to the next slide. We came up with a map of Idaho and we broke it out. We had four different timing or breeding seasons to looking at all of our diverse landscapes, all of our road systems, and that. We came up with a map for our ITD folks so that our maintenance foremans, our people out there mowing and spraying, so they could see their areas within their road systems in their areas and they can target and plan for their specific activities. So we developed this map of Idaho, which included the foreman areas, the road systems. We have contracts with BLM for fire reduction, which are down in the southern Idaho area in the little orange boxes. And then we sent this map out and broke it out to each district. So we even broke it down further. So each district had their own map showing their own monarch breeding season with their road system in the foreman areas. Next slide. We also developed an interactive website with real-time monarch migration timing. And if you were to go out to our website and you wanted to choose a specific area within Idaho and wanted to know, is this road system under the monarch breeding season or migration season, those road sections would turn red if it happens to be within that timing, or they would turn brown, green, or some other color when they were outside that timing. Meaning if it was outside the breeding migration time, then they could continue doing whatever practices they needed to without disturbing or causing any issues with monarchs coming in and out of Idaho. Next slide. So this map is this map shows that the observations for milkweed and again the green flags represented the milkweed that we actually surveyed during the research. So the larger the flag, the more milkweed stems that were recorded. The yellow triangle represents the research transect sites that we monitored for over 2 years and collected data on. And then the colored circles represent monitoring sites using the Monarch scorecard. So all of the red circle, colored circles are additional areas that we started collecting using the Monarch scorecard. Next slide. So, from our research and moving into the Monarch CCAA, we came up with some maintenance activities and some recommended practices with that. So we went out before our whole operations team from our upper management down to each individual district, talking about management strategies that we'd like to see happen and some modifications changed in the way we do things. So we came up with mowing limitations. So we agreed upon as an agency and as each of the districts that we worked with that mowing would not exceed 30 feet from the edge of pavement, no matter what road system you were on. However, if you had narrower right-of-ways, such as our state highway systems, they needed to also consider leaving buffer zones or intact habitat near the fence line. And then a minimum mow height of 10 to 12 inches or taller is recommended to allow milkweed regeneration and extending bloom periods. And then limit additional mowing in the same direction or location within the same year. So limiting those amount of repeated mowing within the same location in the same year. So changing things up so that they're not continuing to mow the same areas the same time every year. Some of our spraying practices and modifications included not to spray more than 30 feet from the edge of pavement. And then again, if you had narrower right-of-ways, to leave a buffering zone or intact habitat towards the fence line. And then anything outside of the 30 feet, we recommended spot treatments, especially for those areas towards the back slope or biodiversity zones, to minimize the spray activities, avoid spraying weeds while adjacent plants are flowering, and then prioritizing management tasks for special management agreements, such as those with the BLM. So looking at all of these things, these were our recommendations to our maintenance folks for doing things. Next slide. So when it comes to seedings, we want to reseed our disturbed areas with native seed mixes, including nectar or flowering plants. And we want to also include maintaining temporary set-asides of suitable habitat on portions of our ITD backslope biodiversity zones as well. So those are our recommendations for any of our maintenance folks when it comes to revegetating, replanting disturbed sites. Next slide. Yeah, so adapting and implementing our conservation measures. So we're taking positive steps to protect known milkweed locations and pollinator habitat. This is an ongoing process, so it's going to take several years to keep moving forward and working with all of our district maintenance folks on that. We anticipate that it's going to take, some time to get to the fully implementing all of these measures, but we've started early. We're working through it. And we also have to document more of our milkweed plants and locations for all the rest of our Idaho areas. So we focused on southern Idaho, but we need to really continue getting and documenting all of our milkweed plants and patches within our road systems. So with having that, we can actually then talk about prioritizing for our pollinator habitat areas. We can prioritize and preserve high quality monarch pollinator habitats within our systems. We have over 11,000 lane miles to go, but we're working through it, and hopefully we'll get that through the next coming years. Looking at using LiDAR data and imagery that was collected in 2023. So we're still working through documenting more milkweed sites. And then monitoring is another one. We just completed our first year monitoring for the Monarch CCAA. So we actually came up with 60 random locations based on our adopted acres. And we collected 40 data from 40 of those sites. So next slide. So our next steps, we will be completing our annual report, summarizing our achievements, documenting compliance tracking, which is total acres seeded, areas not mowed or sprayed beyond the 30 feet, or acres that were spot sprayed or spot treated beyond 30 feet. And yeah, and then monitoring again, we did our first monitoring this summer. We were hoping to have it contracted out, but that didn't work, so we had to hustle and try to find some volunteers to help us with that. So we had 40 plots that we were able to document, survey, and collect data on. These were on 20-mile intervals, lining up with mileposts. And yeah, it was an amazing time of all this effort that was put in. Next slide. And this just shows that the teams, we had 6 teams, 24 people, 2 days to collect data, 40 plots sampled. We focused in the southern Idaho area of districts 3 and 4. We covered a lot of lane miles. We covered like over 4,000 lane miles within those 2 districts, just looking at roads, collecting data and looking at road systems. And then we had a 1-day training. So next slide. Our timeline for adopting and implementing our conservation measures. We're taking positive steps to track and protect known milkweed locations. We anticipate training with all of our districts and maintenance crews over the next 5 years. And then we will continue to conduct monitoring in 2026. We're looking at moving a little bit further east. And then as our ramp up period comes closer, we will have included all of Idaho at some point in time with reporting and monitoring. So with that, next slide, I believe I'm done and I will stand for any questions.
Thanks, Kathy. What a cool research project. And yeah, if people have questions, please put them in the chat. And I'm especially excited to hear that you found that even degraded roadsides host a variety of bees and bumblebee species and butterfly species, because that's definitely part of the whole roadsides being great opportunities. I know I was curious, so for the research, was that site surveys and aerial photos that you pulled that information from, or combination of both?
Combination of both. I mean, we physically surveyed the southern Idaho's, some specific road systems where we had our research team drove up and down both sides of the road system, stopped and collected data. Those were the green flags, so to speak, on that one map. And then as we move forward with collecting more of the milkweed locations, we're trying to use imagery, photo imagery to collect that data as well so we can document it, hopefully to save a little bit of time so we don't have to drive every single road system. I mean, I've driven every single road system, but for me or anybody to stop, get out of the truck, walk around, take survey 1, 2, 3, and fill out all that, it takes a lot of time. So we're hoping we can move it quickly or quicker by using imagery and stuff like that, LiDAR.
There are a couple more questions in the chat that I know I can stick on for a couple minutes after, but for those of you who can't, thank you for joining.
Yes.
But for those of you who can, Kathy, from Dan, have the mowing recommendations been adopted, especially in the narrow clear zones or smaller roads?
I would say yes. I just past few weeks I've been driving to different meetings and I have seen the narrower right-of-ways where they have only done one mowing pass or one mower width. So I think they have adopted that. I don't know if that's everywhere in the state yet, but I know our districts are trying to work on that and trying to leave some of those sections without mowing it. So, so yes, some of our districts are doing that from where I've traveled so far.
Yeah, I saw some great photos of a ton of milkweed along the fence line, so that was some good photos to see. And then have you seen any streamlining or coordination benefits with BLM, USFS, or other agencies as a result of your CCA enrollment?
Um, I wouldn't say streamlining, but we are coordinating with other agencies. We're working with our local Fish and Wildlife Service. We're working with our Idaho Department of Fish and Game and the BLM. I mean, all of our agencies know that we've entered into the Monarch CCAA and know that we're trying to preserve areas, specifically suitable areas for pollinators and monarchs. As far as so the outreach is there, it hasn't fully come to a complete circle where we're streamlining, I guess, in that sense. There again, certain areas that we have different management strategies, such as fire mitigation with the BLM for certain road systems that have a lot of annual grasses. I've been working with our districts to try it as they come up with renewing contracts with the BLM to discuss those areas to see if there's areas, because I know there's milkweed in those areas. We just, as an agency with that agreement, can't go out and do specific target treatments because they have specific they have specific things they want to see done out there. So I'm hoping in the future we'll have more discussions on that.
Yeah, I know you just got your CI earlier this year, so
Yes.
maybe some more time will lead to some other streamlining. Um, yeah, Jacob was wondering, are the findings available in a report that's publicly available?
I know it's on our website. I will, and I'm pretty sure that because our research was done through Montana State University folks, so I'm sure that they have published it somewhere. And then we've published it on our website as well. So I will look to see if that's externally available. I'm
Okay.
not sure how our folks, if they publish all of those externally as well as internally, but I'll check on that.
Okay. Yeah, if you send it over to me, we can link it to our follow-up email.
Yeah.
For those of you who are curious. And then Carol Andrews from St. Louis County was wondering how you selected your monitoring locations and also how you use LiDAR and imagery to ID milkweed locations.
So the monitoring locations was selected using we had two factors. We had road system type. So we had interstates, US highways, and state highway systems. Basically because they all are a little bit different. So we wanted to look at how that influenced pollinators, and then we use the NDVI, which is that greenness scale, level scale. And that we with those two um, factors included for every road system, our research team then identified places on a road system based on the NDVI, so the brownness or greenness levels, and selected road systems, just a random road system. I don't remember how many road systems it included. And then they selected a specific monitoring point for that. So it used the NDVI, the greenness level, as well as the road type, and kind of bunched those together and then selected road systems within that to go through and monitor and collect the data.
Uh,
LiDAR came in after the fact, kind of this is after the study was done, and we started collecting more data on our roads using LiDAR and photo imagery. So, the pavement, the shoulder, culverts and stuff like that. And then it was kind of an after fact. Well, what about can we utilize data because it took photos and we have the right of way areas now we have imagery of that. Can we identify milkweed based on looking at those photos and those the from the LiDAR and the photo imagery? And we found that we could do that. Of course, it would cost us a little bit more money to pull or extract that data because we have to have somebody to go through that data and visually look through to find the milkweed plants or the patches. So, yeah, we did it. It can work and does work. We just have to extract that data.
yeah, very cool. Appreciate you speaking today. Seems like a lot of people really appreciated it.
Yeah, thank you,
Not,
everyone.
yeah, I'm not seeing any other questions. So, yeah, thanks everyone for sticking around, and thank you, Kathy, for presenting today. And everybody have a good
Yeah,
rest of
thank
your
you.
day. All right, thanks everyone.